If you are a Bitcoin hodler and you hold your Bitcoin on exchanges or really any third party, you, my friend, are actively working against the 21 million hard cap. But sir, that's a serious accusation. I know. And that is why in today's video, we are going to pick this topic apart. Let's jump in. Welcome back to another video. My name is Ian Major. I'm an entrepreneur, Bitcoin pleb, and all-around raging capitalist. And those were some pretty serious words moments ago, but sometimes tough love is exactly what is needed. And so in today's video, I'm going to pick apart the thesis that if you're a hodler, right? I don't care if you're a trader, that's fine, do your thing. But if you are a hodler and you have your Bitcoin on exchanges, you are not only abdicating personal responsibility, but you are actively working against your best interests and against the 21 million hard cap. And we're going to pick apart what I mean by that and some of the possible sort of attack vectors that are being referenced here. But I thought I'd serve up something a little spicy for this week, right? A little clickbaity, yeah, but again, tough love is sometimes needed. But it's not all tough love, my friends. We've got the holidays coming up. Christmas is just around the corner. So Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all of you. And it is truly a time for celebration, as we will get to in this video. January 3rd is the anniversary of the Bitcoin Genesis blog, and there is a special celebration that goes in line with today's video. So you won't want to miss a thing. For those returning to the channel, welcome back, my friends. Happy holidays, and great to have you here as always. And for those new to the channel, and I know there are many of you, over 80% of you watching right this moment are not currently subscribed. And so if you like this content, I invite you to consider subscribing and join us in our merry and growing gang in cyberspace. I cover all manner of Bitcoin-related content, including bits like this, news, analysis, tutorials, wallets, running your own node, Bitcoin mining. You want it, I cover it. That is the name of the game for this channel. And as you consider those you care about this holiday season, if you're orange pilling friends or relatives around the dinner table, I invite you to consider the Bitcoin Beginner Series that I recently put out, which is essentially everything I wish I knew about Bitcoin at the beginning of my sort of learning journey, compressed into an 8-part video series. Of course, none of that will ever be a full substitute for the deep rabbit hole that is Bitcoin, but I hope it can be a useful tool in your toolkit as you're chatting with those you love this holiday season. With all that out of the way, let's jump into the meat of today's video. All right, so let's talk about the problem. If you are a self-professed hodler, there are two problems if you're leaving your Bitcoin on exchanges. One is the abdication of personal responsibility. You simply haven't studied history enough within the last decade. There have been so many folks who have gotten wrecked. Of course, Mt. Gox being the most notable example, but far from the only example of people leaving their Bitcoin either on exchanges or with different third parties without kind of verifying, right? The whole mantra of don't trust, verify. But you have a lot of people, I think, who have come into the Bitcoin space over, say, the last year or two, who have kind of taken the Coinbases and Binances of the world as these like holy institutions that surely have my best interests in mind, right? Wrong. And so just because the space has matured and you have better capitalized entities that are serving these important roles as exchanges, I'm not bashing them for existing, but I am simply warning you as a hodler, do not trust these entities. So take the time, do the work, respect those private keys and what they mean. They are your pass to personal monetary sovereignty. And there is no price you could put on that, right? And so take the time. I have so many videos on this channel, and there's other great channels like BTC Sessions and many, many others who have put out great content to help individuals secure and take self-custody of their Bitcoin. And so I've got a whole playlist that says how to secure Bitcoin that I will link in the description down below. So that's the first part, and you should be concerned enough about that, right? But the second one goes even deeper. And it's this idea that you're not just personally abdicating responsibility, but you're also actively contributing and working against the 21 million hard cap. Now, for now, that's a little bombastic and exaggeration, but it's not hard to imagine a world where this is actually true. What do I mean? There's a few different types of tactics that exchanges and others can use that undermine the supply cap of Bitcoin. And there are really two flavors of essentially the same thing. So one of those things is something called rehypothecation. I have covered this a little bit in bits and pieces on this channel, but I'll throw up this great diagram. This is from Unchained Capital. And so they're sort of showing that their model, you don't have rehypothecation versus one where you do. And so let me just explain this. Unchained Capital, for those unfamiliar, is a service provider of multi-sig vaults. So you can use them just to simply store your Bitcoin in a multi-sig vault. You can also proceed to then borrow against your Bitcoin. So if you need to raise fiat for a certain expense, whatever. So that's what Unchained Capital does. And you can see on the right-hand side here, they do not do rehypothecation, meaning you deposit your Bitcoin and that is it. You get fiat in return if you're borrowing against it, and that is it. That is the end of the story. On the left-hand side, you can see many more arrows and steps in the process. And that is because you are depositing your Bitcoin, so the same first step that we had on the right-hand side. And that crypto lender, whoever it could be, there's tons of these now today, they are likely using a third-party custodian to actually secure the Bitcoin. And so that custodian is holding the deposits on behalf of the crypto lender. This is a very common setup. Now, what can happen though is that third-party custodian, and in some cases it can even be the crypto lender itself, there doesn't have to be this third-party custodian, but in either case, those entities that you've just deposited your Bitcoin with will turn around and lend your Bitcoin out for other purposes so that they can make money. That could include making a yield on the Bitcoin. That could include, lending it to market makers or hedge funds who are actively shorting Bitcoin, right? Like one of the ways you short, you bet against something is you short it. That means you borrow, in the stock world, you borrow shares of the stock. In the Bitcoin world, you borrow Bitcoin and sell it on the market with the expectation that the price will go down and you'll be able to buy back at a lower price and close that position or trade. And so there you go. Like, think about that. Unless the service you're using has taken the time to make it clear that they're not doing rehypothecation, you should by default assume that they are. And so that's something that you need to consider. That is a risk both to yourself and to the broader sort of Bitcoin community. This creates a lot of counterparty risk, and it can also serve to fuel shorters of Bitcoin. I'm not saying that we should ban shorters of Bitcoin. It's a free market, and that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. Bitcoin is one of the freest markets left standing, and will continue to be that way. But don't help them. Don't actively help them, right? Make them work for it to prove out their thesis that Bitcoin should go down, right? Don't help them. That is what you're doing with depositing funds with entities that do rehypothecation or sort of relending out the collateral that you yourself put in. And so just imagine if everyone were to come to one of these platforms that's doing this and demand their Bitcoin all at the same time. It may not be there, right? And so that gets me into the second and perhaps more generalized flavor of this issue, which is simply fractionalized reserves. So the fractionalized banking system is really at the root of the money printer. A lot of people think about Jerome Powell or other central bankers kind of cranking the monetary crank, but it's really banks, commercial banks, that lend dollars out and create fiat from nothing when they lend money to you for a mortgage or for a business loan or whatever the case may be. And so, for example, in the case of banks in the US, there is a 10% reserve requirement, meaning that the bank has to have 10% of all the money that they're lending out, in reserves that sort of back the credit that they're creating out of thin air. And just stop and think about that for a second. 10%. is a shockingly low number. Imagine everyone going at the same time to kind of pull their money out. It is simply not there because it has been created out of thin air. That is a massive, massive problem, and really is what underpins a lot of the issues that we have with the modern fiat system. And so don't get me wrong, I don't think there's like a massive amount of kind of real evidence that this is happening with crypto exchanges, but using rational thinking, this is a clear incentive. Like if you're a rational person, you should assume that exchanges are doing this. You should assume that they are using fractionalized reserves. And the reason for that is the age-old saying of, security is the least important thing until it's the only thing that matters, right? And so Nick Carter's actually done a lot of great work on this. I'll flash up this kind of proof of reserves page that he has on his site. I'll link this as well in the description down below. And he basically goes into this whole kind of introduction around proof of reserves, the concept essentially being that there should be some verifiable process for users to validate that their deposits truly do reside within the entity that they deposited them in. Nick goes on to explain that right now, like it'd be very difficult to imagine a fully trustless version of this process, this kind of proof of reserve attestation. But, his kind of argument is let's not let perfect be the enemy of good. And I would tend to agree. He has listed here at the top different entities that have conducted a proof of reserve attestation. I don't think this is exhaustive, as he calls out. I do think something like Kraken, I know, has done these attestations in the past. But, just let's assume that it's not exhaustive, but still, glancing across this list, there are a ton of big players that are not on this list, right? Doesn't mean that they're not fully backed. Doesn't mean that they're implementing fractionalized reserves. But again, as a rational hodler, we must assume that this is happening. Otherwise, it's just you're taking unnecessary risk. And so let's play this out. Let's play this out into a future where there are many, many more users of Bitcoin. And you have, not just the kind of early innovators and the early adopters, but you have this kind of early and mid majority that comes into the Bitcoin ecosystem. What are they going to do? Well, they're, without the right kind of direction and guidance, they're probably going to just leave Bitcoin on exchanges. And so imagine a single Bitcoin on an exchange that, Tommy over there thinks is his. But the problem is Betty over there also thinks that Bitcoin is hers. But whose is it? We don't know because the exchange has implemented fractionalized reserves. And so it's really not that difficult to imagine a future world. And again, my bet is that it's already happening where exchanges are doing this. And, I don't literally think we'll get to a world where we exceed the 21 million hard cap because there are so many kind of cold-blooded hodlers that are withdrawing their Bitcoin from exchanges. But you can imagine a world where there's 10 million Bitcoin on exchanges, and let's say that 40 million individuals each think they have one of them. Well, there you go. It's 40 million Bitcoin. This is how money is printed out of thin air. You may think that's a ludicrous example, but again, just think through it, right? That is the system that we currently live in. And so to the extent that exchanges and other financial institutions sort of co-opt the entire system and drive the main behavior from users, that is what helps enable that type of future state. Perhaps a third flavor of this is some of the manipulation that can occur within the kind of derivatives and futures markets. I've done a video on that I will link in the description as well, so I'm not going to go into that in depth here. But suffice it to say, for all these flavors of issues we've just covered, there is a simple solution, and indeed an upcoming annual celebration that we should all be participating in. So what's the solution? You've probably guessed it by now. It is to get your Bitcoin off exchanges. If you do that, if you take self-custody and withdraw your funds, none of the above that we just discussed can be supported. And you are declaring, as Trace Meyer says, longtime OG Bitcoiner Trace Meyer, you are declaring and redeclaring your monetary and personal sovereignty. And there's nothing more important than that. And so I'll throw up this website. It is proofofkeys.com. This is from back in 2018. Trace Meyer, who again has kind of dropped off the face of the earth, but for many years he was one of the big advocates for Bitcoin. Saw what was happening before many others. And he tried to kind of institute this new cultural norm for Bitcoiners where every January 3rd, i.e. the anniversary of the Genesis block, hodlers of last resort would come in and kind of make sure that any of their coins that are on exchanges or third parties are swept into their own custody. And so I would urge you to watch the video that's on this webpage. It is terrific. Trace has some excellent points. And so what else can you do? Share this with others. You'll notice the new little tag on my Twitter handle that comes from the Proof of Keys webpage that's kind of symbolizing this, celebration and redeclaration of our monetary sovereignty. And so if you're interested in spreading the word, I'd encourage you to adopt that. And spread the word to your loved ones who may be newer to Bitcoin. And like I said, I've got tons of step-by-step tutorials on this channel for different wallets, hardware, software, desktop wallets, you name it, different ways to acquire Bitcoin, some KYC, some non-KYC. So have a look and feel free to share this with those who might be newer to the Bitcoin world, and hopefully they can be helpful resources to help more people not just get off zero, but to also adopt best practices and hodl like a true hodler and like a first-class citizen, as Trace Meyer explains. So there's my holiday time challenge to you all. With that, let's go ahead and close this video out. So there you have it, my friends. I wanted this to be a little bit provocative, a little bit clickbaity, but it's in the name of a very important mission, and it is to ensure that people are aware of the implications of leaving their Bitcoin on exchanges. It really isn't real Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins. And so I hope, if nothing else, this has been a sort of challenge to you to sweep any Bitcoin that you might have on exchanges off, and to encourage others and those you care about, particularly those who might be earlier in their sort of journey, to do the same. And so if you're like me, on January 3rd, I will be, I really don't have that much out there on third-party platforms, but I will be sweeping all of that into my own self-custody, where most of my stack is anyways currently. But I'd encourage you to join the charge and help keep exchanges honest, and let them know we will not put up with fractionalized reserves that have bastardized the entire current fiat system. I want to end with another excellent quote from Trace Meyer in that video, which again I encourage you to watch, and it is, "These threads of monetary slavery are often wound around us and too thin to be felt until they're too strong to be broken." So that's the wisdom I'll leave you with. None other than Trace Meyer. And so there you have it, my friends. I'm curious to hear, what do you think? Let me know your thoughts and questions in the comments down below. But for now, we'll go ahead and leave this here. I hope you found this valuable and useful. If you did, you already know what to do. Give this video a like. And once again, my friends, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I hope you will take up the torch in the January 3rd Proof of Keys celebration of our monetary sovereignty. Remember, every sat counts, especially if it's held in self-custody. And until next time, I'll see you then.